Logically speaking, after the Ethiopian original tongues was written in Ge'ez, the biggest names of paganism brought a Greco-Roman, Syriac, Eastern Oriental, Egyptian, Tewahedo church to Ethiopia. Therefore, its job is to lead people away from following the commandments of the Most High, which was given to Moses and what Jesus follows. Hence, Jesus follows the laws of Moses, which was given to Moses by the God of Israel. No wonder every year the story of Easter changes. Yet still, that Tewahedo church proves that they're pagans. Why? Because it changes every year. Let's watch. Last year, they told you Easter was April 20th. In the 2024 is May 5th. This year is April 12th. Next year is May 2nd. You know, in other words, they don't know what day Jesus died. So let's watch.
On the cross, man or God?
Fully man, fully God.
But God cannot die.
But the thing is that he came in form of human.
That's why I'm saying human sacrifice. But you said no. You have to pick your side. Is it a human sacrifice or is it God's sacrifice? We know God cannot die. So the only thing you're left with is a human sacrifice.
Maybe yes.
Not maybe, definitely yes. Yeah. Because God doesn't die. God is immortal. The only one who can die are the creations. The fact that Jesus died itself proves that he's not God. Do you know he's God?
Hello, the Father. So let's watch their stories of his birth.
Oh, it says here, and about the 6th hour. If Jesus was crucified at 9 a.m., according to Mark, how could he be in Pilate's court at noon?
Honestly, I was more prepped for the other argument. I would need to read into that.
Okay. Do you see the contradiction?
I see how it can be interpreted as contradiction, yeah.
Okay. How else could you interpret it?
I would have to look into the context of it.
What possible context would line these two up? That he would be in Pilate's court at noon and on the exact same day be crucified at 9 a.m.?
I think if he wasn't yet, he hadn't yet died.
So they nailed him to the cross at 9, took him down, and then brought him to Pilate at noon?
Possibly, or...
Possibly?
Mm-hmm.
Why would they nail him to the cross and then take him back down and then take him to Pilate to be crucified? They crucified him twice?
Hello. See, the story's not adding up because it was made up during the Renaissance period. So let's watch.
In the time of King Herod.
Jesus was roaming in the time of King Herod.
And let's go look at Luke. This was the first registration that was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. So is that true?
Sure.
King Herod, right here, and Quirinius, right here, they ruled 10 years apart.
I don't know.
Well, how can this be true if they were at a completely different time? King Herod was ruling, Quirinius was not ruling. And then when Quirinius was the governor of Syria, King Herod was not a king. We have verified outside historical sources of that. If you read this, though, Quirinius was governor of Syria. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. Who was that child?
Okay. Obviously Jesus.
Obviously Jesus. If Quirinius and Herod ruled 10 years apart, are you saying to me that A, Joseph registered twice, and B, Mary was pregnant for 10 years?
Well, we can't assume he did register twice.
So then that means Mary was pregnant for 10 years.
Obviously not.
So which one is true?
Well, according to the Bible, I'd have to believe because of my...
Hello. That's why it says Jacob is God himself in Psalm 135. And Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born. In other words, Jacob is God. Moses, also known as Joseph, is Jesus' dad. Hello. So let's read. Good teacher, what shall I do that I may inherit eternal life? And Jesus said unto him, Why callest thou me good? None is good. Thou knowest the commandments. Teacher Moses wrote unto us. So that's why they said, Have you not read in the book of Moses, in the place concerning the bush, how God spoke unto him, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So ask yourself, did Jesus give Moses the commandments? And was Jesus there before Moses? I don't think so. So God spoke to Moses before Jesus. And he is not the God of the dead. So he could never be crucified. Hence, every story of a first century Jesus is made up. That's why it says, sing to God in praise of his name. Extol him who rides on the clouds. In other words, Elijah is the one who rides on the clouds. when you, God, went out before your people, when you marched through the wilderness, the earth shook, the heavens poured down rain, before God, the one of Sinai, before God, the God of Israel. That's why in the books of Jubilees, it tells you straight up. In the first year of Exodus, God spoke to Moses. And Moses went up into the mount of God, and the glory of the Lord abode on Mount Sinai, and a cloud overshadowed it 6 days. And he called to Moses on the seventh day. So is that Jesus calling to Moses, or is that the God of Israel calling to Moses? So Moses was on the mount 40 days and 40 nights. And God taught him the earlier and the later history of the division of all the days. Hello? In other words, Jesus is not God. That's why Haile Selassie himself said this.
Have you a special word for young people of these days?
On this occasion, I address also all those within our empire. Our Christianity is not restricted to a given church, and I stress above all that we do not wish to make distinctions.
So ask yourself, is the Tewahedo church telling you this? This is in the book of Esdras, which is in the Haile Selassie 72 book Amharic version. It tells you, Jesus the son of Josedek, of the house of David, out of the kindred of Phares of the tribe of Judah. In other words, Phares, also known as Perez, is one of the twin sons of Judah, and he is the kindred to Jesus, the son of Joseph. Why? Because Josedek is Judah's brother. Remember, God had 12 tribes, and Joseph and Judah as his sons. So Jesus is the cousins of the son of Judah. And Jesus would do this. Then stood up Jesus, the son of Josedek, or the son of Joseph, of the house of Israel. And what did he do? He made ready the altar of the God of Israel, to offer burnt sacrifices upon it, according as it is expressly commanded in the book of Moses, the man of God. You get it? Moses is Christ. So let's read. 3 different people. For my son Jesus will be revealed with those that be with him. After these years shall my son Christ die, and all men that have life, and the world shall turn into old silence 7 days, like it as in the former judgment, so that no man shall remain after 7 days. The world shall be raised up, and the earth shall restore those that are asleep in her. And the Most High shall appear upon the seat of judgment. In other words, Elijah. And the misery shall pass away, and the long suffering shall have an end. In other words, follow God, not man. So who is going to be revealed with Jesus? This Jesus was the son of Sirach, the grandchild to Jesus, who lived in the latter times, after the people had been led away captive and called home again, almost after all the prophets. In other words, during the end of Revelation. Now his grandfather Jesus, as he himself witnesses, was a man of great diligence and wisdom. So the Jesus that you thinking died thousands of years ago is supposed to be here now in the latter times when people are speaking English. Hello? So the first Jesus died, and then Sirach's son left his book to his own son Jesus. In other words, there will be 2 Jesus alive in approximately 25 years. So this Jesus did imitate Solomon, who's supposed to be here during Revelation to be the king of an everlasting kingdom. And he was no less famous for wisdom and learning, both being indeed a man of great learning, and so reputed also. In other words, Solomon is supposed to be here during Revelation. Solomon is Moses.
My advice to all is to fulfill the 10 Commandments. You are aware of the contents of the 10 Commandments and can elaborate on it. If the nation for which I am the emperor follows and accepts this, since it's also what I accept and follow. I would believe our country is not only historically Christian.
Hence, follow the God of Israel. That's why Selassie I did this. In 1962, a new Amharic translation from Ge'ez was printed, realizing that there ought to be a revision from the original Greek and Hebrew, which was added into the existing translation. Hence, he put in the 5 narrow canons that they left out. And notice they are Ethiopian deuterocanonical books. And what are they? Jubilees, Ge'ez, and 3 books of Maccabean. So in Maccabean, it warns us about the Greek kingdom and how people from Ethiopia is going to follow their religion. And that's exactly what's happening now. So what did Selassie I do in 1962? It's very important. It is important to know that the EOTC has 2 Bible canons, the broader canon and the narrow canon. So the Haile Selassie version of the Bible, which was published in 1962, contains a narrower canon. In other words, he didn't want that European additional stuff added in. So his narrower canon in Amharic translated from the Ge'ez. So what is in his 72-book Bible? Jubilees, which they don't have in theirs, Enoch, which is an Ethiopian book, and you want to see Esdras, which they left out, and Maccabean. Hence, they're trying to hide the truth. Follow Jah, not man. And forget what that church saying.